Hello and welcome to the Victorian Hyper Yielding Crops Research Centre here in Narwarri, in Victoria's high rainfall zone about 30 kilometres west of Geelong. This site is part of a new GRDC investment looking to increase productivity across Australia's high rainfall zones, led by Far Australia. I'm currently standing in what is a series of trials that we're terming the GEM trials, as they're looking at germplasm, environment and management. These trials are replicated in some form across all of our research centres across the high rainfall zones of Australia. This one here in Narwarri, we're looking at 10 different varieties under 3 different management levels. We have a standard and a high management treatment, which have different levels of nitrogen, fungicide and PGR inputs, but we're also looking at the effect of grazing. In our research work, we rely on mechanical defoliation of our plots at growth stage 30, and although not exactly replicating the effect of grazing livestock, it does give us a good idea of the amount of dry matter available and the subsequent effect on the crop canopy, flowering date and final yield. So what effect does variety have on grazing? Well, that can depend whether we're using a spring variety or a winter variety. As a general rule of thumb, we find that the longer it takes for a variety to reach growth stage 30, the higher the dry matter produced. So to my left, I have a spring wheat, Trojan, which we grazed in early June. And next door to it, a winter variety called DS Bennett, which was grazed in early August. Next door to DS Bennett is an even slower developing winter wheat called RGT Calibro, which was grazed just last week in late August. Although we haven't analysed data from our Narwarri site yet, previous figures from Far Australia's trials in South Australia at the SA Crop Technology Centre demonstrated that Trojan, being a quicker spring variety, produced less dry matter than winter variety DS Bennett. However, both of these varieties produce less than our slower moving winter wheats, which are staying in their vegetative phase for a lot longer. But how does grazing affect the grain yields of these crops? Well, again, it appears to depend whether you're growing a spring variety or a winter variety. In early sown scenarios, looking at April sowing in SA, we found that spring varieties, such as Trojan, can actually yield more following grazing. This is simply the result of delaying the variety's development and changing its phenology in relation to its original sowing. This delay in development can help push the flowering windows slightly later, having an occasional positive effect by avoiding earlier frost events and making the variety better suited to some of our longer season, high rainfall zones, where spring varieties can develop too quickly from April sowings. In contrast, winter varieties that produce greater dry matter but reach growth stage 30 later in the season suffer a yield penalty come the end of the season, since grain fill is pushed later in the season when conditions frequently don't allow the crop to compensate for earlier defoliation. Therefore, like many things in farming, it's a trade-off between grazing in early spring and grain yield come harvest. The economics of grazing and the value of dry matter will ultimately dictate which scenario will give the highest gross margin, remembering that this is in an April sown scenario.